Most founders think they know who their customer is. They don't. You've written it somewhere in a deck, in a doc, in a message to your co-founder. You're targeting SMBs or technology companies, but these are not ideal customer profiles. And there's a real cost to not specifically identifying your ideal customer profile. If you build your whole go-to-market sequence around a broad ICP instead of a specific person at a specific type of company, then your messaging is going to be too blunt and broad to resonate with anyone. You're going to be assuming which marketing channels are going to work the best for your business, and the type of customers you attract might not be the ones that are actually going to move the needle in the long term for your business. They'll provide noisy feedback and not necessarily even be aligned with what you're really looking for. So I'm going to show you how to fix that. By the end of this video, you're going to have clarity on how you can build customer profiles across 3 dimensions: demographics, psychographics, and behavioral. And there's another thing we're going to cover later on in the video, which is the psychology of making purchase decisions. It's really important to understand how your ideal audience makes purchase decisions, not just who they are. This is also the next video in our go-to-market crash course series. So if you haven't watched the previous ones, it's not mandatory in order to understand this, but I highly recommend it. By the way, I'm Ramsey, and I help early stage startups with their go-to-market, storytelling, and wider marketing, and I've driven billions of dollars in enterprise value for my clients. So without further ado, let's get into the video. In the last video, we mapped out our internal context. So goals, team, capital, and distribution assets that we had available to us, or strengths. Now, this part is going to be focused on the external context, which is our audience. And the relationship between the two is really, really important because every decision that we make in defining our ICP affects a lot of other things. For example, the channels that we have, the messaging, the product MVP, the pricing that we put out for this product. All of it is determined by the audience that we select. And the decisions downstream of all of these are also affected by the customer that we try to target. A vague customer definition doesn't just make our marketing harder, it makes everything downstream from there a lot harder as well. Because if we bring in the wrong people, then we'll get poor feedback, and that will slow our learning, and then that will burn runway on things that don't move the needle. So we're going to be spending a lot of time and money and effort on things that are not really going to move our business forward. So just to show you what I really mean here, when our ICP is unclear, the downstream effects can skew our progress very fast. Because if we choose the wrong ICP, we might choose the wrong channels where we push our marketing and sales material, which means that we'll be reaching the wrong audience. If we have the wrong ICP, we'll also have generic messaging, which won't cut deep. Specificity allows us to create messaging that is going to resonate with our target audience, but we'll get onto that in a minute. And if we have the wrong messaging and the wrong channels, we're going to attract the wrong people. And the wrong people will provide noisy feedback. If we have too many different types of people using our product, all of whom are not really the core ICP we're trying to target, then we're going to get contradictory feedback, which is not going to help us in making the product any better than it is. And because of that, our client acquisition costs will increase because the messaging is not tied to a specific person. The sales cycle will lengthen because people don't know that the product is for them or not. And ultimately, our retention is going to suffer because we might sign people on who have a different expectation of the product when they realize it's not ready for them because we haven't made that clear with our messaging. And the most important thing here is that through all of this, we are slowing down our learning. If we learn slower and iterate slower, we're going to grow slower, right? It's important that we have speed in our learning so we can iterate faster and make the product better and grow faster as well, and not waste time and capital and other resources on things that are not going to move the needle. So it's about learning faster, spending less, and building a go-to-market system that gets us from 0 to 1. Now, we're going to start here with a very common mistake. Most founders default to broad targeting because it feels safer, right? You feel like if we go wide, then we might catch more people. Our TAM is bigger. We can make more money. And if we go specific, we might miss people. Now, that logic is a little bit backwards because the broad targeting doesn't really protect us. It exposes us to more attack vectors that might slow down our growth. Because when our ICP is too broad, right, the messaging is also very broad. So it has to work for a lot of different people, so it has to be generic just by nature. And so it doesn't end up saying anything specific to anyone. It isn't sharp enough to cut through to the right people. And then our feedback becomes noisy. We can't distinguish a real fit from an edge case or a non-customer even. and you start building features for the wrong segments. And that's ultimately not what we're trying to do here. And when our messaging is sharper and we're putting it in front of the right people, we're going to have a higher conversion rate. We're going to have a lower client acquisition cost over a longer period of time because we're really sharpening it. So anytime a lead comes to our platform or a high intent user comes to our platform, they know it's for them and they can convert with much more ease. And we have to remember our first 10 to 50 customers are not just revenue. They are an opportunity to learn for your processes, learn on your messaging, and hone in from there. So being targeted and being focused here is going to allow us to do that even more effectively. Because again, the broader targeting, you might have people dribbling in from different market segments who want different things, who have different problems and needs. And so it's important that we ignore those contradicting signals and reduce them as much as possible by being as focused as possible. Now, how we decide who that initial ICP is something that we'll get onto later in the video towards the end. So stay tuned for that. But as we go through, you're going to be learning how to ultimately pick apart and decide who that ICP might be. And then we'll find who the wedge ICP will be for a go-to-market. When defining our ICP, there are 3 layers we need to look at. And they are illustrated here in this pyramid that I've drawn. Hope it's aesthetically pleasing for you. Now, the first layer is the base layer, which is demographics. This is basically who they are on paper. Their role, their persona, the company size, the company stage, the industry, if you're B2B or B2C, this is kind of like who the sales champion is and the person who you want to use your product. Now, something to be clear on, especially on the B2B side, is that this might not be the decision maker. There are many instances where you're selling a product for a specific person in an organization, but the decision maker might not be the person who you're trying to target. So when you're doing this exercise, make sure you outline both of them because you will need to speak to those different people in different ways for your sales conversations. But ultimately, this is about understanding who's going to best benefit from your product and who you're trying to target and solve the problems for in the first place. So this layer will kind of give you an idea of broadly what this person looks like. It's necessary and it's the foundation of it all, but it's definitely not enough in defining who the exact ICP is. Now we can get on to the second layer, which is the behavioral. This layer tells us about their behaviors, and if we can understand where to find them and how they engage with products like this, how they behave online and in person, then it's much easier for us to help fit the product into their day-to-day life. And the final piece of the puzzle is the psychological side, the psychographics. And this is why they act the way they do. What do they want to achieve? What does that achieving do for their career? What is their status, their sense of being? Are they good at their job? What are they afraid of? What keeps them from moving forward? What risks are they managing? What is their career incentives that are at play for them? Are they trying to look for a smart play or stay safe or move fast or protect their position? This is all really important. And this helps us align our messaging and what to say to those people in order to get them to resonate with our product. Now, most people have layer 1 done and they use that as the broader scope of things, but this is really not enough. Adding these 2 as well allows us to target the people and then sell to those people. And so you really need all 3 layers to really bring a defined ICP together. It's really about understanding who they are, what they do, how they behave, what are their pains, their desires, their motivations, where do they hang out, and what the triggers are that are going to help them push this product internally or even convert themselves if they are the core decision maker. And this is also the same for B2C. I know this sounds like a lot of B2B stuff, but even if you're selling to consumers, you need to look at their psychographics and behaviors as well, because that's going to allow them to convert in the easiest way possible. Just speaking to a broad stroke group of people is not going to really help in selling to them. That's just going to help you find them. And we need to do the other 2 things, which is find their behaviors and their psychographics to really understand how they tick and how we can sell to them effectively and market them as well. So we've just gone through the ICP Depth Pyramid and looked at every single layer in a high level. Now it's time to go a bit deeper. And one of the number 1 questions that we'll start off with is, how specific is specific enough? And this usually pertains to the demographic section of the pyramid. And I like to use this ladder to kind of show us how specific we should get. Now, there's 4 levels to this ladder, and I'll start with the first one, which is category. Now, the category is something like SaaS companies or fintech or governments. It gives us an idea of the type of company or sector the company sits in, but that's all it gives us. It doesn't give us anything more. There's no GTM decisions to really be made here, and it's not obvious how we can really target them based on that alone. Now, the second layer gets us a little bit closer, which is segment. So we have things like B2B SaaS or video games or neobanks. It's better, a little bit more targeted, but still not actionable. And this is actually where most people stop. They just say, oh, we're targeting B2B SaaS companies or neobanks or XYZ that hits government organizations or something. This is really not enough. You can't really make any real go-to-market decisions around these 2 levels. Now, at level 3 is when we start getting a bit more distinct and a bit more segmented here. So looking at the profile, right? So how many people do they have? What is their revenue? Have they raised a price round? Is there a specific geography that they're in? Right now we're getting somewhere. We can find these companies. We can write to their situation. We can understand them a bit more. And then once we understand exactly what type of company we're looking at, we need to look at our sales champion, the ideal user separately, and who they are, what their problem is, and again, look at their all demographics, behavior, psychographics, which we'll get to in a second. So who is the person? Is it the founding CEO? Is it someone with a technical background? Is it someone selling to enterprise for the first time? This is where our decisions actually are made. Once we understand who we are selling to and the profile of their company and their situation, we can make a lot better decisions around our go-to-market. And again, most people operate at the first 2 levels, but we're trying to close the gap and make sure that you can operate on all levels. So you understand the segment of the market they are in, the profile of the company, and then the sales champion, exactly what they look like. And again, we're going to go through all of this in a second now. So the demographic tells us who the customer is on paper, but paper doesn't really buy things, people do. So to get to the people, we need to understand how they actually behave. So now we're going to be looking deeper into the second layer of the pyramid, which is behavior, right? And usually, again, we're looking at how people make purchase decisions, where they congregate online, all these types of things. So we're going to start with the way that people make purchase decisions. Now, not all buyers behave the same way. Even within a specific ICP, understanding what type of buyer you're dealing with changes everything about how you approach them. And usually, depending on the type of person you're targeting, a lot of them might skew towards a certain one, but there's always outliers, and it's important to understand the different types of buyer and what they care about. Now, starting with the driver. The driver is a decisive and results-focused, from an ego perspective, a type of buyer. They want to know that things can help them in achieving their goals and their desires. Long explanations and a lot of numbers might lose them. You need to lead them with a direct outcome. Amiable buyers are the next one that we'll look at. So amiable buyers are buying on relationships and trust. They want to feel that you understand their situation, that you're in it with them and you're helping guide them through it. And they also like to see that other people who are like them have used your situation. So things like testimonials, case studies, community related aspects are really good with these people. So they can see that other people like them are using your solution. Thirdly, we have the expressive buyer. And these are people who are driven by intuition and feeling. They want to respond to a story, to a vision, and how something makes them feel about their own work and their own potential. So they can move fast when something resonates, but they can also walk away for reasons that are hard to really rationalize. So storytelling and making them feel that this product is ready for them is very important over hard numbers and outcomes. And finally, we have the analytical buyer, who is very much logical, based on evidence, more economical. They want data, case studies, comparisons, and the economics of how it works and the time to think about that. They will read everything that you send them, usually, and they are not going to rush into making a purchase decision. They will make the best rational decision for their company. And your goal is to show them that it's illogical to not make the decision to purchase this product. So knowing which type of person you're speaking to is really important. And you should be creating your content and sales to account for all of these different types of people. And again, as I mentioned, your initial market wedge will likely have an ICP that most people skew towards, because obviously people in different positions in a company share similar traits. So if you're a CEO, you're less likely to be an expressive person as opposed to maybe someone on the creative team or something like that. And that's just an example. I could be completely wrong about those two types of people, but we're just saying it for the sake of example. So you should know about all of them so you can shape your sales conversations, your scripts, frameworks, and your content as well. Now, the second thing is understanding where they congregate, because this affects our distribution decisions, right? So do they congregate online? Which communities are they active in? Are they active in Slack groups, in Reddit, in threads on Twitter, LinkedIn, Discord servers, niche newsletters? Not where we think they should be, but where they actually are. It's really important to really meet them where they are. Or are they IRL at events, conferences? Are they going to meetups every weekend? Are they going to private dinners? What is their kind of behavior when it comes to in real life events? Or are they very networked? So do they only listen to selective sets of people? Do they only trust from a few different people? Do they hire from network? Are there influencers in their communities that they listen to? What is the way that they acquire information and make decisions and build trust? Because ultimately, these all affect our distribution decisions and the channels that we make. If our ICP is very focused on Reddit for whatever reason, and we go to Instagram, tough luck, we're not going to reach them. So it's very important that we understand where they congregate and where they gather information from and how they gather information as well. So that's extremely important there. And the third part of understanding their behavior comes down to their day-to-day reality, right? What tools are they using every day? What are their real constraints in their job? What are their actual priorities on any given Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the week? What do they really care about every day? If we don't understand how they tick, then it's going to be very hard to sell them a product, especially if you're in a competitive market. So really understanding how your product will fit into their day-to-day life is extremely important for showing them that is going to move the needle for them in their life. So knowing your customer is what gets you to the right person, and knowing their problem is what gets you to the right message. And most founders define the problem at the wrong level. They're normally describing symptoms and the surface level frustration, but that's rarely going to drive a real outcome or help them make a purchase decision. So now we're going to look at the psychographics on the psychology of what people want. So their problems, their motivations, their desires, and how important these problems are. And when we look at making purchase decisions, there's usually two triggers, right? We have firstly the problem, which can be internal, external, or philosophical. So we'll go through this first. External problems are practical, they're visible, the process is slow, the data is scattered, the tool doesn't integrate, whatever it might be, something that affects them from the outside in. And these are easy to articulate and pitch towards because normally we can see them quite easily. But they're rarely the reason that people really switch from one product to another or make a strong purchase decision. Now, the internal problems are what the person feels, right? So if they're frustrated or exposed or behind or out of control, a CFO whose reporting is slow isn't just annoyed at the process. She feels like she can't do her job properly. She feels like she's embarrassed to go against her peers and other C-suite and give her reports because she's not ready. That's an internal problem. It's much more powerful. And the third is the philosophical problem, right? And this is basically the deeper tension, if you could call it that, and what feels wrong about a current situation beyond just the inconvenience to the person, but in a general broad sense. So things like it shouldn't be this hard. Why is it this hard? A company like this shouldn't be running on spreadsheets, if you're looking at the example of the CMO. Or there's a better way to do this. Why is there no better way to do this? This is where the conviction people have really lies. So if you can spark that philosophical trigger, then you're going to be much more aligned with that person. So the strongest GTM messaging addresses all three layers, but realistically, you should pick one as your core focus. So some people who are bringing in a new category of product might go on the philosophical route because there's not necessarily a strong basis for external or internal problem definition there yet. But you can pose a philosophical worldview and then question how people think. That'll be one thing to look at. Or again, depending on what your situation is, you'd pick an external, internal, or philosophical problem to kind of base your messaging around. And again, naming these different problems do different things. One allows you to show that you understand their situation, understand what they're feeling, and then touches them on like a deeper level so they can go ahead and understand that your product is the right fit for them, that you are the right company to deal with what you're dealing with as well. Now, once we've understood the problems that our ICP faces, then we can look at their other triggers. So the problems, that was embarrassing. The problems tell us what the customer is dealing with. Now the triggers tell you when to move and why now, 1 month, 6 months ago, right? The trigger is a specific event that takes someone from this is annoying to I need to fix this now. So again, there could be triggers within the problems, and that's why they're having the problems, but we need to really identify what triggers all this pain and allows for us to kind of wedge ourselves in the conversation and start pushing our solution, right? So but underneath every trigger, there is something more important, which is the underlying desire to change that. And then what is the motivation behind that? As an example, let's say there's a founder who wants to enter a new market and reach a new audience, but can't without a solution. That would be the event, wanting to reach a new market. The desire is to grow and have a better competitive advantage against their competitors and win more market share. And the motivation would be the ambition or the drive to make more money and scale the business. So that's how you can kind of package it. Or, for example, someone who wants to look better in front of their boss, that's the event, because the desire is recognition and career progression, and the motivation is security, status, belonging, money, etc. So you have these three things that are packaged together that make up this trigger. Now, the trigger gets you into the door and grabs the attention because it's familiar, right? And they feel it. And if you show them that you understand their triggers, their desires, and their motivations, they are more likely to understand that you might be the right solution for them because you understand them so deeply that there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to help solve their problems and overcome whatever objections they have as well. And here's what it means also practically. If your messaging only speaks to one event, you're competing on all the features. So if someone is, let's say, want to reach a new market and you just compete on that level, then you're just going to be competing on a feature by feature basis. But if it speaks already to the desire and the motivation, you're competing on identity, and that's a completely different conversation. If you can make them feel a specific way and make them become a person that they want to become, then a lot of the feature conversation doesn't really matter. They know that you understand what their deeper desires are and that you can help them get there. So what we're really looking at is a before and after, right? You have the before situation, which is this specific frustration or a cost or confusion that they're living with. And then the after is a specific improvement, not just in their workflow, but how they feel, how they're perceived, and what becomes possible for them. So if you can't clearly articulate this, your customer probably won't either. And if they can't articulate it, then they won't buy. So we really need to understand them so deeply that they don't even need to say what's on their mind. They just feel that you understand them. And that is normally enough for them to be like, okay, cool. This person understands my pains. They understand what makes me tick. They've been in my shoes. I should trust them in their solution. And it makes you a lot more trustworthy as well. So it's really important to understand the psychology of the person, their triggers, their problems, what they really want out of their life, what their situation looks like, and what their before situation is and what their after situation should be. So we can link those two and show you and your product as a facilitator of all of that. Okay, so we've covered the specificity ladder, the ICP pyramid, how to find problems, channels, analyze different buying triggers, and really understand our ICPs to a T. Now that's the thing. We're usually analyzing a set of ideal customer profiles which make up a wider audience or target market that we're looking at. But we need to find the starting point, which is our wedge. Which audience should we target for our go-to-market and then branch out from there? Now, the wedge is not our total addressable market, right? This is every single audience we could ever target. This is every single person who could ever buy our product. We can then look at the SAM, which is our serviceable addressable market, which is a slightly smaller segment of the TAM. The SOM, which is the serviceable observable market, which is a slightly smaller segment of this. And then we have our go-to-market wedge, right? Now, the wedge is not our total market. It's the initial market we're going to be targeting. It's a sub-segment where the pain is usually most acute, where you have the most natural access or credibility or network to reach them, and ideally where our learning velocity will be the highest. So usually you might see that people have this wedge as the SOM. Might have this wedge as the SOM, which is totally normal. Actually, you can have this depending on the market. But sometimes it's also good to have like an even smaller subsection of that market, which is your go-to-market wedge. And there's two things that we need to look at to decide, or what I recommend to decide where your wedge is. The first is natural access network, easiest to target. So if you're picking between two different ideal customer profiles, and one is only in specific conferences because they don't have much time to go out anywhere else, or they're all on LinkedIn, very active, I'll just go to LinkedIn because you're going to have a much easier time accessing them there, just as a brief example. So that's the first one, right? Who is the easiest person to target from your network? Who do you have the most natural access to? And who can we generally target much more easier and have an advantage in targeting that other people do not, or we don't have with another ICP? The second is who feels the pain the strongest? Who is really, really ready to make a purchase on a solution that solves this pain? Because there's two things we have to look at. There's usually people who are solution curious or really feeling the problem. If we target an ICP that might want this solution and they might be curious about the solution, there's a higher chance that they're not going to convert as opposed to the people who are currently feeling the problem and need it solved now. The people who are currently facing this problem and are feeling it in the most acute way are the ones who we should target first, because they're going to be the ones who will allow us to know if this solution is the right solution for them, if it works, why it doesn't, and get us that initial feedback. If we go to a target market that has the pain, but it's not as strong, or they have other solutions or workarounds, they're going to be more solution curious as opposed to wanting to fix a problem now. And so we'll slow down our conversions, might not be the fastest way to get our 10 to 50 initial customers, and also slow down our feedback as well, and might not give us the clear feedback that we want. So remember, our wedge is where we win our first 10 to 50 customers. Not because those are our only customers, but because those are customers that we can learn from and improve our GTM motion from them as well. Let's say we started off with this. A founder building a financial forecasting tool writes the ICP as finance teams at growth stage startups. Now, this is level 2 on our specificity ladder. The firmographic is there, but not anything else. It tells us nothing about how to actually go to market and what type of person we're trying to target, because this says finance teams. So let's break down this ICP into the ICP pyramid. The layer 1 is the demographic, right? We have the first-time founder or new role as a CFO, Series A SaaS startup, 30 to 80 people, B2B revenue model, right? This is the demographic as per our 4-layer specificity pyramid. So we have the specific person, the type of company they're at, Series A SaaS company, the exact kind of size of the company, all that stuff. So this is a much more specific demographic than our initial finance teams at growth stage companies. Layer 2 is our behavioral. So managing cash flow and runway in spreadsheets and Notion, budget owner, but needs CEO sign up above 20K, higher than the last 6 months, still finding her feet in the role. So we understand what her day-to-day looks like. It's probably pretty fast, pretty hectic, using kind of typical tools. Nothing that's really cohesive or centralized. She's across multiple tools, trying to kind of do her job. Psychologically, she wants to be seen as the person who brings in financial clarity to a chaotic early-stage environment. Fears being caught off guard in front of C-suite and board. Her credibility is still being established, which is very important because this means that she's still being evaluated, so she needs to look really good. And every interaction with leadership either builds it or erodes it. So it's not at a point where she has strong repertoire with her peers. She still needs to make sure that she looks good at every single point. So now we can look at the problems, right? Which we need to pick one because there's 3 types of problems here. We have the external. Her cash flow model lives in 3 different spreadsheets, none of which fully agree with each other. Her scenario planning takes her a full day to rebuild from scratch every time assumptions change because things are moving fast at a startup. So she feels that the current selection of tools is not benefiting her because it's becoming very clunky for her to make any real progress. Internally, she feels exposed. Every board meeting is a potential ambush. She's never fully confident in the numbers she's presenting. And these things are moving fast, and the uncertainty shows that. The effect of her tools is impacting her internal mental, and it's making her less confident in her ability to perform, which ultimately is not good because, as we know, every interaction that she has is kind of building trust or eroding it with her peers. So she wants to make sure she feels comfortable. And philosophically, she feels that at a company of this stage with this much running on financial decisions, she shouldn't be running on spreadsheets held together with a VLOOKUP formula. There's probably better ways. She knows it. It frustrates her that nobody has solved it properly. So we have a very clear context. Someone is looking for a solution to help them with their external and internal problems. And we know that they're solution curious as well. And they're definitely in the midst of the problem. Now, here's like a trigger, right? A board meeting where someone asked about 12 months runway under 3 different scenarios. She didn't have a clear answer ready. The desire underneath it is to walk into every board meeting feeling prepared, in control, and credible. And her motivation is that her career is at an inflection point, and getting this role opens the right doors. Getting caught flat-footed closes them. So she knows that this is a very important time in her career. She has a strong motivation to succeed, and a product that will allow her to feel more prepared, feel more in control, is going to help her do that. So she's an analytical buyer with amiable tendencies. For example, she'll research thoroughly before committing because she's a CFO. She's likely to be running the numbers and making sure this makes economic sense for her business. So that's why she's analytical, but obviously make an assumption here on her amiability as well. She'll research thoroughly before committing. She'll read all the case studies, compare alternatives, want to understand exactly how the product works before she puts her name behind it and recommending it internally. But she also needs to trust the people she's buying from. Cold feature-heavy pitch won't land. Warm evidence-backed conversation probably will. Now, where does she live? Online? Well, online groups. She's with CFO groups, finance operators, at startup groups. She's reading more than posting, but she notices when someone shows up constantly with useful thinking and valuable content. She attends 1 or 2 CFO-specific events a year, not the big conferences, the smaller ones, more intimate, just the ones where she can actually have real conversations. So we understand where she congregates, and we understand now, finally, what she wants for an answer. So before scrambling the night before every board meeting, rebuilding scenarios by hand, never fully certain that the numbers are right, bracing for a question she won't be able to answer cleanly. And after, she ideally wants to be in a situation where she walks into the board meeting with very clear statements, fully defensible, updated in minutes, not hours. She owns the room. She looks like she's been doing this for years. The board and the C-suite are confident that they made the right decision. Once we understand all of this, right, because a lot of this is, can be assumption-based, I recommend you do your due diligence in speaking to people, doing interviews, speaking with network people that you've worked with before, all of that who would fall into that demographic. But once you have all of this, the most important thing is you understand, okay, now I can go and make messaging, positioning, storytelling material for our brand and product. I know where I'm going to market my product. I know how I'm going to sell this product and how to sell it to XYZ different person and where I can start. So it's really important that we get all of this down, or at least have an idea, because the worst thing that we can do is have no idea. The better thing to do is have an idea and validate or invalidate that, and then find out what is actually correct or incorrect. Because otherwise, we're just going to be doing it blind. At least this way, we can hypothesize it and make it look, make it a lot more structured, which is really, really important. And once you have that, you can then go and push to market and test that hypothesis. So it's been a long video, but we've covered a lot. We know that broad targeting is actually an expensive cost to your business, and specificity is important in making sure that your message hits the right people. You can learn faster, move faster, and ultimately grow faster. We learned that there's multiple depths to an ICP, from their behaviors, their psychological state, and their demographics, all the way to how specific those individual layers go. And we understand that we need all of the different pieces to put together a cohesive and structured ICP that we can test against and make sure that our messaging and marketing and go-to-market motion is going to be targeted in order for us to get the best information and make decisions from there. Now, it is extremely important that you do this to the best of your ability and in as much detail as you can for your go-to-market motions, so you can understand the set of ICPs that you can possibly target with the most sense, and then find your wedge and push to market effectively. The last thing you want to do is just push your product to market randomly, push it to random people who don't really care about the product, feel that your product isn't necessarily a fit, and because of your poor targeting, you might give up on the project or spend a lot of time and resources pushing it to the wrong people. So it's really important that you do define your ICP correctly, and I hope that this video has given you the opportunity to understand how you can do that in the best way possible. And if you want help applying this to your business and making sure that you can define the best ICP messaging, storytelling, and marketing possible for your go-to-market, feel free to book a call with me in the description below. Now that you understand who your ICP is and who you're going to be targeting for your go-to-market, you got to understand what type of go-to-market motion is going to be the best fit to actually get them to buy your product. Because product-led, sales-led, marketing-led, community-led, and all the other go-to-market motions that there are not always a fit for every single company. So now we've got to figure out which is the best fit for us. Picking the wrong motion can waste you months. So that's what we're going to cover next. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, comment, subscribe, and share it with another person who would find this valuable. And we'll see you in the next video in our go-to-market crash course.